Hey guys, what's up? I'm here with a top 10 list for you. This one is gonna be a bit of a doozy because this one took me like an hour to go through my entire list of these movies and really narrow it down to some of my favorites. Um, there's gonna be some criteria for this list. This list is my top 10 favorite bad movies. Now, in order to make this list, the film first of all, we cannot have any Trauma movies on this list. Even though Trauma puts out a lot of really fun bad movies, I don't want to put any on this list because that's just an easy way out. So, no Trauma movies. Same goes for Ed Wood movies. No Ed Wood movies either, mainly because, again, it's to be expected. Another thing I have to say is none of the obvious choices, so you're not going to see Troll 2 on this list, you're not going to see Samurai Cop on this list, you're not going to see Glenn or Glinda, you're not going to see The Room on this list, you're not going to see Plan 9 on this list, and while I do enjoy all of those movies as bad movies, they're not making the list. The other criteria is that these movies have to have a rating, an average rating on IMDb of 5 or lower, 5 out of 10 or lower. So that really does cut out quite a lot of bad movies that have relatively decent ratings. So, before I get into it, I'd like to just give a quick little list of a bunch of titles, just right off the top of my head, that I could really just think of when I think of, really fun bad movies that I enjoy, that I'm just not putting on the list because they don't meet the criteria. So, obviously, the later Friday the 13th sequels, Jason Goes to Hell, The New Blood, The New Blood, A New Beginning, Jason Lives, Jason Goes to Hell, and Jason X. All of those, although those are very fun, enjoyable bad movies, those are not making it on the list because they're I would say they're almost obvious choices. Also because I like them, but they're not fun bad movies like the ones I'm gonna put on the list are. Gestapo's Last Orgy, while not necessarily, I would say, a bad movie, I actually think this is a fairly well-made, interesting, although immensely exploitive, Nazi-exploitation film. It's still got a 4.9 out of 10 average rating on IMDb, so it could fit the criteria, but I don't enjoy it as a bad movie. I enjoy it particularly as a kind of, piece of exploitation trash. The Sorority House Massacre movies, 1 and 2, both fairly entertaining, fairly fun kind of slasher films, especially the second one. The second one is just so ridiculous. But again, not some of my favorites. I still really enjoy them, and I think at least the second one fits the criteria. Slumber Party Massacre 1 and 2. The first one does not fit the criteria because it has I think it has a 5.6 or 7 average rating on IMDb. I know the second one fits the criteria, but again, the second one, while I do really enjoy that one, it just can't make I won't put it on the list. The Leprechaun movies, obvious reasons, they fit the criteria, but again, those are obvious choices. The shot on 16mm film Back from Hell from 1993, that one fits the criteria entirely, and I do really like that movie, but I've only seen it once, and I haven't really sat on it long enough and really thought about it to put it on my list of my favorites. The Refrigerator from 91. The Refrigerator is a horror comedy about a man-eating refrigerator, and it fits the criteria, but I've only seen it once, and I remember it being really good. I remember it being legitimately creepy and also legitimately hilarious, but that was about 3 to 4 years ago when I first saw it. So I'm going to have to refresh my memory on that before I could put it on the list. How to Make a Monster is another one that I really enjoy, but I wouldn't call it one of my favorites either. How to Make a Monster as in the one from 2005. Las Vegas Bloodbath, a shot-on-video film, a fairly nasty, violent kind of shot-on-video film. I honestly think kind of inspired by the Richard Speck murders from the 60s, I think that's when those murders were committed. That one, again, I have fun with that movie. It's gross, stupid, gory, but it's not the most enjoyable, fun movie ever. Nurse 3D, that one is legitimately bad all over the place, and it's another one I would put on this list if I didn't have such a love-hate relationship with it. I mean, I legitimately hate the movies so much for how just stupid and like fucking terrible it is, but at the same time I love it for how inept and bad like everything in the movie is. Jack Frost from '97. This one almost made the list because this is a Christmas classic for me. I watch it every year, but I kind of feel like it's somewhat of an expected bad movie. I mean, it's got a decent-sized cult following when it comes to bad movie love. And there are some other movies that I wanted to put on the list that of my favorites that just kind of bumped it off. So this one would be like the number 11 if I was doing an 11. The Nostril Picker, another one that I've only seen about one time, so I don't really want to put it on the list. These next two are ones that would have made it on the list as well if it wouldn't have been for other titles. The video violence movies. The video violence movies are just bad and kind of fun, but they're fairly decent shot on video films. Dead Time Stories and The Willies, both fairly fun, cheesy, goofy, bad anthology horror films. And I know Dead Time Stories fits the criteria. I think The Willies almost fits the criteria of the list. And I will admit there's I think about one or two titles that I put on the list that do kind of break the criteria of having a like 5 rating or lower, but I love them enough to put them on the list. So I am kind of breaking my own rules here. The Wizard of Gore, The Gore Girls, 2000 Maniacs, Blood Feast 2, Blood Diner, all of those fairly fun movies, fairly enjoyable bad movies. Would have made the list, but it's one movie. Another rule is one movie per director. Killer Tomatoes movies, all the Killer Tomato movies, at least the first one, Return of the Killer Tomatoes, and Killer Tomatoes Strike Back. Those ones are all pretty fun, bad movies. Again, those are like the expected movies on a list of best bad movies. The Porky's movies, not necessarily to be expected, but the first one, which is the best one, I think, has almost a 6 out of 10 average rating on IMDb, so I can't really put it on the list. Anaconda, I love the Anaconda movie. The second one is really bad too, but the first one at least had some. It was a lot more fun. Slime City and Slime City Massacre, both fairly enjoyable, low budget kind of splatter zombie slasher films. Also kind of body horror-ish. Didn't put them on the list because it got bumped off by other titles. Now we get to like the specifics. Really any early John Waters movie, whether it be Pink Flamingos, Multiple Maniacs, Desperate Living, Female Trouble, and even, what was it? A Dirty Shame. Really any Ed Wood movie, like I stated before. The two I've seen that I really love are Glen or Glenda and Plan 9 from Outer Space, which I own Plan 9 on VHS and Blu-ray. And any Lloyd Kaufman movie. So any of the Toxic Avenger movies, any of the Class from Nukem High movies, Terror Firmer, Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, all of those would have made the list, don't meet the criteria, and again, they are expected to be on a list of best bad movies. Now with that long, literally nearly 9-minute long intro and kind of honorable mention runner-up list out of the way, we can finally get to the actual list of my top 10 favorite bad movies. Keep in mind, all of these movies except for one on this list are horror movies. Mainly because there are a lot of bad horror movies out there, and I watch almost nothing but horror movies. So, without further ado, let's just fucking get this thing started. At the number 10 spot, we have a little movie from 1972 called Zat. Zat is a fairly unknown and forgotten monster movie from the early 70s. Shot in Florida, and it's essentially a movie about a guy who wants to who thinks like humans are terrible, and he's also like an ex-Nazi, and he uses his Nazi science knowledge to turn himself into a fish man, and then he goes out and kills people and like captures women to make fish women so he can mate with them and start a whole humanoid fish race. This movie is at number 10 mainly because I have a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun watching this movie. I've already watched it a few times and I really, really have fun with it. But there are quite a few moments in the movie where it does get a little slow. There's some scenes of talking, but the scenes of the guy in the monster suit swimming or stumbling around aimlessly are just absolutely hilarious, and I can't not enjoy them. If you like bad monster movies, if you like stuff like, I would say maybe you like Critters, or maybe even stuff like Yongari, or Reptilicus maybe. I mean, those are giant monster movies, but essentially the same thing. If you enjoy movies like that, this one is, I would definitely say, give it a shot. It was on Mystery Science Theater 3000, just like Reptilicus and Yongari was. And well, those two were actually in the most recent season of Mystery Science Theater 3000, actually. But Zat was on there in the 90s under the title of Blood Waters of Dr. Z. And yeah, there's a Blu-ray release of Zat out, and it looks phenomenal. And the director, it has a director commentary and everything. It's a really nice release. But number 10 goes to Zat from 1972. I think it's 72 or 71. I know it's early 70s. I know that much. The number 9 spot goes to Herb Robbins' The Worm Eaters. Herb Robbins only directed 2 movies, and it's kind of a shame. The only good movie he ever directed was a movie from 1977, I think? I'm pretty sure it was 1977, called The Worm Eaters. It was produced by Ted V. Michaels, probably most well known for directing directing Astro Zombies, which is a very fun kind of bad zombie slasher film, and The Corpse Grinders, 2 other movies that I forgot to list in the honorable mentions that are really fun bad movies. But those 2 movies are fun as hell. But this movie, The Worm Eaters, is a weird movie that stars the director as a German hermit who can telepathically communicate with earthworms, and he uses his ability to communicate with earthworms. He uses it to breed worms that when humans eat these worms, they turn into worm people. And these worm people are literally just like people wearing a sleeping bag tightly bound around their waist. And it's obviously like just a brown fucking sleeping bag. It's a horror comedy that tries to do gross out humor by having people eat like live worms in front of a camera. And it just comes off as really fucking stupid and gross and terrible. It's kind of like if John Waters wanted to direct a body horror film. I think he would do something like this. The funny thing about The Worm Eaters is it's a movie that's rated PG. I'm pretty sure it's rated PG at least. But I honestly have a lot of fun with the movie. It's a movie, I would say, very similar to something like The Greasy Strangler, how that movie got a lot of hate and a lot of grief. And I can understand why this movie and The Greasy Strangler would get hate and grief and all kinds of negative, attention towards it. But I still absolutely love them. So for this one, I could recommend it, but please proceed with caution when it comes to The Worm Eaters, because it's one of those movies that just is a product of the 70s. There's no way this film could have been made any other decade. Next, at the number 8 spot, we have Curse 2: The Bite. I've seen the first The Curse movie, which is actually an Italian-American co-production that was produced by none other than the Italian godfather Gore Lucio Fulci. The first Curse movie is an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's A Color from Space. I think that's what the story is. But the first one is kind of an interesting, weird, kind of gross body horror film, and it's fairly cheesy, but a pretty fun movie. The sequel, which has nothing to do with it, is even better. The sequel has to do with a guy who is bitten on the hand by a snake, but this snake is no ordinary snake. It's a radioactive snake, and this causes his hand to turn into a fucking snake. Like, he doesn't turn into a snake person. His fucking hand melds together and forms into a snake over the course of the entire film. Also, there's a snake, half dog, hybrid monster in this movie. I should also mention the effects in this movie are done by none other than Screaming Mad George himself. Screaming Mad George, if you do not know, did the effects in the body horror film and the body horror classic Society. And Society is one I would highly recommend just as a great movie in general. That movie is fucking awesome. But Curse 2 The Bite is such a satisfying movie because I was told about it and I instantly was like, that sounds like an immensely just fun, satisfying as hell movie. And honestly, it really fucking is. Like, it's hard. It's one of those movies that if you can get into bad movies, like, there are people out there who like bad movies who trash that film. And it bothers me because I honestly don't see how people cannot enjoy this film. It is so fucking stupid, but it's fun. It's fun, it's gross, and it's literally just like a road trip movie for most of it. And then his hand turns into a fucking snake suddenly. And he fucking fingers his girlfriend with his snake hand. I forgot to mention that too. That fucking happens in the movie. But yeah, number 8 is Curse 2 The Bite. Number 7 is Microwave Massacre, which was completely just this kind of forgotten, lesser-known kind of slasher film until Arrow Video came to the rescue and put it out on Blu-ray. I was legitimately surprised to hear that a film like Microwave Massacre was getting a Blu-ray. Essentially, Microwave Massacre is a movie about a guy who hates his wife's cooking, so he fucking kills his wife and accidentally, like, cooks her and eats her, and realizes he loves to eat human beings, and he proceeds to, like, go out and pick up hookers and then kill them and eat them. Now, this sounds like a really gross, kind of splattery film, but the film is almost completely devoid of visceral gore. Other than maybe a couple severed limbs, a severed head here and there, and a little bit of blood. Other than that, this film is primarily empty of gore. And it is mostly nudity and very deadpan kind of jokes delivered by none other than fucking I can't remember the actor's name. I really hate to pull the fucking Blu-ray off the shelf to remind myself, but I'm gonna have to. Jackie Vernon, comedian Jackie Vernon plays the killer. This is actually his last role before his death. And he was also the voice of none other than fucking Frosty the Snowman. So this is a movie where Frosty the Snowman kills hookers and eats them, and gives lines like, "I'm so hungry I could eat a whore." This is one of those movies that, based on the title and the description I just gave, some people are going to know that they're going to love this movie, others will know that they won't. I legitimately adore Microwave Massacre and all of its fucking stupid ineptness. What's really funny about Microwave Massacre is originally the lead role was considered, and it was written specifically for none other than comedy legend Rodney Dangerfield. And to think that there's probably another universe out there where we could have gotten this film with Rodney Dangerfield in it, that would have been amazing to see Rodney Dangerfield play a cannibalistic serial killer and give lines like that. But Jackie Vernon does just as good of a job in the film. But yeah, that's number 7, Microwave Massacre, from '83, I think it was from. I should really write down the years when I do this kind of shit. At the number 6 spot, I have a film from 2002 called Terror Toons. Now, the Terror Toons movies are great, well, except for the third one. If you want to know my thoughts on the third one, watch my review of it, because my review of it was so negative to the point that I said it makes me want to fucking kill myself. And when a producer of the film saw my review, he hit me with a copyright strike, because he knew that my negative opinion of Terror Toons 3 would impact the video-on-demand sales for the film. Keep in mind, I did pay $4 to watch the fucking atrocity of a fucking film, Terror Toons 3. But we're not talking about part 3, we're talking about part 1. Terratoons 1 is from 2002. This is a 15-year-old movie that somehow has 2 sequels to it, and 3 more, and I think like 2 or 3 more planned currently, which is absolutely fucking nightmarish to think of because of how fucking awful Terratoons 3 was. The first Terratoons, however, is a really low budget, really fucking awful, must-seen to be believed slasher film about murderous cartoon characters created by Satan, and the gore effects are laughable, the visual effects are fucking bad, even by 2002 budget of $2,000 standards. I mean, there are better fucking visual effects in basic fucking Windows Movie Maker, and that's saying something. That's what Terratoons is, and I honestly, it's one of those movies I think you could find out whether or not you would enjoy it just by watching the trailer, because just like with Microwave Massacre, it's one of those movies where you watch the trailer, you hear about it, and you'll know if it's the movie for you or not. It's so phenomenally fucking awful, and I absolutely adore every second of the film because of how terrible it is. Also, it stars porn star Lizzie Borden, of all people. Next, we get on to I think this is actually the only holiday film on the list, and the only Gremlins ripoff on the list. The best Gremlins ripoff, starring none other than fucking Grizzly Adams himself, Dan Haggerty. Elves from 1989. Elves is a film that I really doubt exists. Like, I honestly have doubts that this film actually exists, and it's probably just some fever dream that I'm sharing with a bunch of other people because of how fucking phenomenally weird and bad it is. Essentially, Elves is about this teenage girl, and her grandfather was like a fucking Nazi or something, and he worked with the Nazis to create a race of human elf hybrids that would then breed with a pure German female to create a master race of Nazi German elf hybrids that would then take over the world. It's a movie about Nazi elves. And when I say elves, I mean elf, because there's only one elf in this movie. And it says, and the tagline for the film is, they don't work for Santa anymore. The thing is, they never fucking worked for Santa in this movie. And according to this movie, even though these things are biologically engineered and created by Nazis, somehow they are also mentioned in the Bible, and as well as, like, multiple books on the occult. It's a movie that must be seen to be believed, and I absolutely adore Elves so much. I watch it every year on Christmas. I love it so much, I actually, for a second I thought my DVD shelf was about to fall over. I actually bought the film on VHS, on it was a bootleg VHS, but the tape itself is green and red. And it's, I love Elves with a burning, fiery passion. It's the only movie where you'll hear Dan Haggerty say the line, "I want to know the connection between the elves and the Nazis." God rest his soul, because this movie needs a Blu-ray release with a director commentary explaining how this director thought a movie about Nazi elves was a good idea. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. At the number 4 spot, we have the one exception to the 5 out of 10 rating or lower rule, because I love this movie. I legitimately love everything about this movie, because on top of it being an immensely inept, stupid, poorly made movie, it's also a really creepy, dreamlike, surreal, nightmarish kind of Herschel Gordon Lewis inspired splatter film. Also, it's kind of a zombie film and a slasher film, and many other different subgenres of horror. I'm talking about Malatesta's Carnival of Blood, a film that went completely unnoticed when it came out, and people thought it was lost for years. And then the director released the film himself on his website. The director has since passed away, and he only directed this one movie, which is a shame, because I think with a bit bigger budget, he could direct something. He could have done something great. But essentially, Malatesta's Carnival of Blood is a movie that is about this family, and they decide to start working at this rundown, dilapidated carnival, which really was a dilapidated carnival that they were filming at, and they decide to start working there because their son went missing on the carnival grounds sometime recently, and they think that the owner of the fucking carnival, or his associate, the owner being Malatesta, or his associate Mr. Blood, has something to do with their son disappearing. And on top of that, there's caves underneath the fucking carnival, where at night the carnival workers rise up out of the caves, and actually these carnival workers who only work at night are actually cannibalish zombie ghouls that live in the caves underneath the fucking carnival. It's one of those movies that despite its low budget, if you could really look past the low budget, the really fucking low budget of this movie, you could find something great. You could find a really great, interesting, surreal horror film. And the set pieces in the film are very nice. Did I forget to mention that in this film is none other than Tattoo from Fantasy Island. They got Tattoo from Fantasy Island to be in this film. I didn't even realize that until I rewatched it recently, fairly recently. And I was like, holy shit, that's Tattoo, because it was after I'd also watched The Forbidden Zone, which is another film I would have put on the list if it wasn't for the fact that it was rated like a 6 out of 10. Again, I'm breaking my rule of like 5 out of 10 or lower for this list, but I love this film too much to not include it. And yeah, that's Malatesta's Carnival of Blood. It's fucking terrible, and it's an absolute trip, and it's just it's one of those movies, just like a lot of the other ones I've mentioned already, that must be seen to be believed. Not just how bad it is, but how fucking weird and surreal it is. Okay. At number 3, we have the only non-horror film on this list. It's Howard the Duck. I swear, the fact that there are people out there who absolutely hate this film bothers me. I can kind of get it. It's a very weird movie, and it's definitely, even though it's meant to be a family film, the fact that there are anthropomorphic topless ducks in the film, and the fact that there is a biker gang called Satan's Sluts, and the fact that and also the fact that the fucking main character, who is Howard, falls in love with a human woman and nearly fucks her in a scene. Other than those few really fucking weird, out of place things, also the fact that he that Howard gets a job at a fucking like sauna where people like to fuck in the hot tubs. Other than those things, the movie is a fairly straightforward kind of family comedy, I guess, sort of. I don't know. It has to do with Howard, who is an alien duck who ends up on Earth completely by accident, and ends up having to deal with the fact that he is a fucking humanoid duck on Earth. And that's really it. Then he has to fight some kind of evil alien overlord who also gets sent down by accident to Earth. Yeah. This is a fucking movie that exists. But in all honesty, I adore Howard the Duck. I've adored that film ever since I saw it when I was really young. It was one of my favorite movies when I was really young. And even growing up today, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites now, but when it comes to like adaptations of Marvel comic books, it's one of my favorites because it is the most unique. Like, you look at a lot of Marvel comic book adaptations today, they're very cookie cutter, by the book, fairly serious. They don't like to take risks, they don't like to deviate from the norm. While on the opposite spectrum, end of the spectrum, you have something like Howard the Duck, which is supposed to be a children's film, but has a ton of adult content, jokes children aren't gonna get, nudity, and just like and a fucking alien demon that is pure nightmare fuel to a child. I remember seeing the alien overlord in that film as a kid, and it scared the shit out of me. After that, I saw the chest defibrillator scene from The Thing, and that was officially the scariest thing I had ever seen as a child. But Howard the Duck, I still absolutely adore that movie. Okay, at number 2, I think this actually might be another one that kind of breaks the rule of a 5 or lower, because I think this one has like a 5.2 average rating. But at the number 2 spot of my favorite bad movies is Herschel Gordon Lewis's own Blood Feast, the first splatter film ever. It's a movie that's only about 60 minutes long, and it doesn't need to be any longer or any shorter than it is. It's got really cheesy gore, it's got really bad acting, and a lot of really just ridiculous overacting, to the point that characters would know that Fuad Ramses is a fucking madman by how he talks and acts and looks in his mannerisms, but people act like he's just a completely normal guy. Essentially, Blood Feast is the first splatter film ever, the first film essentially made to just show explicit gore. It was a film made in made in the early 60s, released in 1963, and when they released it, they gave barf bags to the audience, and it was just a big seller, because Herschel Gordon Lewis was a genius, and he thought outside of the box. He thought, after making so many nudie cuties, which were basically nudist camp films in the 60s, he realized, okay, we can't show actual sex without getting an X rating or getting our film getting our film banned from theaters. We're not allowed to say fuck, shit, cunt, ass. We're not allowed to say any foul language, but there are no rules against showing visceral violence and gore. So they did it. They made a film that, to quote Herschel Gordon Lewis himself, that the mainstream either could not make or would not make. In their case, it was both. Today, Blood Feast is a fairly cheesy and fairly tame by today's standards of gore movie, but it has its place in horror film history, and I'm not just putting this one high on the list because it is the first splatter film, or because Herschel Gordon Lewis passed away last September. God rest his soul. He was a great. Honestly, I love his movies, even if they were bad. I loved them. It's not just because of those things. It's because I'll never forget when I first watched Blood Feast, and how much I fucking laughed at everything in the movie, and how much to this day I still, when I pop in that movie and I want to have a good laugh, I laugh and laugh and laugh at that movie. And I just can't stop. It is a movie that I honestly don't think I could ever get sick of in terms of bad movie enjoyment. I can honestly get burnt out on Troll 2. I can get burnt out on even a lot of the films I've previously listed. I can get burnt out on Elves. I can get burnt out on Terror Tunes. I can get burnt out on The Worm Eaters. But The Blood Feast is a movie I don't think I could ever really get burnt out on because of how fucking inept and stupid it is, but how groundbreaking it was. And, number 2 on my 10 favorite bad movies is Blood Feast, 1963. And I'm looking forward to the remake of Blood Feast that's coming out later this year. I heard it's going to get released later this year. I hope so, because I hear it's going to be a fairly serious. Although the first Blood Feast was an extremely serious movie, it's just really fucking weighed down by the fact that it's poorly made. But I hear this new Blood Feast, this new remake, is going to be like really violent and dark and fairly serious. So I'm looking forward to giving it a shot, because I know Herschel kind of gave his blessing when they announced the film. So yeah, that's fucking number 2. At the number 1 spot, was there ever any fucking doubt this movie wouldn't make the number 1 after I reviewed it nearly 3 years ago? After I reviewed it 3 years ago in my senior year of high school, after I watched it multiple times, after I've done even an audio commentary for it last summer on my YouTube channel, I'm of course talking about the low-budget, shot on 8mm splatter film, the first Canadian film made for the home video market, Things, from 1989, shot on 8mm on a budget of about $2,000. This film is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It's another movie that I know a lot of people don't like, but I fucking adore this movie. Essentially, it's a ripoff of Evil Dead, but replaced Deadites and like demons with weird ant monsters that might be demons, might be mutants, and they don't move, they kind of teleport, and it's got like it's got a weird surreal kind of feeling to the place, like they're in a cabin in the woods, but it feels like the hallways in this fucking cabin are never ending, and it feels like this place is a fucking maze because of how disorienting the film is with its lighting, its direction, its sound, and how it's shot and everything. To give it a plot, it's essentially this guy wants his wife to have children, so he lets this doctor experiment on her, and she gives birth to these ant monsters, and these things kind of terrorize this guy and his brother and his brother's friend. And this movie was shot primarily low budget, extremely low budget, by two guys who were like best friends in high school, and they loved horror movies. And when they shot this movie, they lost the audio to it. This is one of the best things about the movie. They lost all the audio, so they thought, well, let's just get shit-faced and redub the movie. So they redubbed the movie absolutely shit-faced, and the dialogue half the time makes no sense, and it feels like you're watching David Lynch's Rabbits. There's actually a theory that has gone around amongst fans of this movie, even though this has been debunked because it's been proven that this film was in fact shot in the 80s and released on VHS in the 80s. But there's actually a theory going around for a little bit that this film was actually shot in 2010 as a ironic art film about the troubles of filmmaking in the 80s, and some people bought it. Honestly, I would have bought it if it wouldn't have been for the fact that there is actual archive proof that this film existed before the year 2000. I'm so happy that this movie exists and that it has a DVD release and that there's an audio commentary track for it, and that the directors and stars are still willing to sit down and talk about the film. One of the most interesting things about the film, other than the fact that it's poorly dubbed, acted, and put together, the gore is really fucking terrible, the effects are bad, the lighting is probably one of the only good things about it, because the lighting is fairly stylized. And the soundtrack is actually half decent, but one of the weirdest things about the movie, I should say, at least in terms of real... I don't know how to put this into words, but one of the most interesting things about the movie is that they somehow got Canadian porn star Amber Lynn to be in their movie. Now, she wasn't in any particularly gore scenes. They were just like, hey, we can get Amber Lynn in our movie. Let's just have her play a newscaster that shows up twice in the movie for no real reason whatsoever, just because we can get her in the movie, and they just kind of fucking put it in there. The thing is if it wasn't obvious by the fact that it's number one on this list, is my favorite bad movie of all time. I don't think anything will ever be able to beat Things unless I find something that can beat Things. I'd like to take this time, the remaining time, to give a couple more honorable mentions that I thought of while I was sitting here. The Evil Dead movies, they're fairly well known. They have particularly high ratings. They're so cult that they've kind of bounced off the wall, and they're no longer cult films anymore because they're so well known and loved. Dr. Butcher, MD, aka Zombie Holocaust, another one that I really love. And again, I know I've broken the criteria for this list twice, but I didn't want to do it 3 times in a row just because I love Dr. Butcher. Honky Holocaust is one that I really enjoy as a bad movie. I'll give Sledgehammer. I'll give Sledgehammer some points. Sledgehammer is a pretty fun kind of shot-on-video film. Fucking Venus Flytrap is a fairly good shot-on-video film. Oh, I think that's it. Uncle Sam, directed by William Lustig. That one's pretty fun too. I don't know what else there is to put on this list. I'm kind of babbling at this point, so I'm just going to end it right here. Anyway, guys, this concludes my list of my top 10 favorite bad movies of all time. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and enjoyed hearing me talk for probably about 40 minutes straight. I'm going to go edit this fucking beast of a video. You guys have a good one. Peace.